If you're familiar with the LGBTQ alphabet, you know there can be a lot of terms to juggle when talking about sexual orientation and gender identity. In our video about this alphabet, we covered a lot of terms about sexual orientation, the desire one has for emotional, romantic, or sexual relationships with others based on their sex or gender. But the alphabet, and our video, don't go in depth in terms of defining sex or gender. So today, I'm here to talk a little bit more about gender identity, one's innermost perception of self as male, female, a blend of both, or neither, that isn't always visible to others. Sometimes people confuse this concept of gender with sex, also referred to as sex assigned at birth, which is a label given to infants based on their chromosomes, hormones, internal and external reproductive organs, and secondary sex characteristics. If your gender identity aligns with your sex assigned at birth, you are cisgender. This is the case for most people, but there are many people whose gender identity doesn't align with their sex assigned at birth, and we're going to look at a few of those types of people today. Some people view gender as binary, or having two distinct opposite forms. Terms that fall under this category would be male, female, trans man, and trans woman. However, there are many people who have gender identities that fall outside of these constraints and are better represented by a gender spectrum than a binary line. A non-binary gender identity, then, is one that rejects the traditional definition of gender as only male or female. Non-binary people may identify as being both a man and a woman, somewhere in between, or falling completely outside these categories. As I explained in my other video, the term transgender describes a person whose gender identity differs from the sex assigned to them at birth. In this way, it refers to people whose identity crosses the gender spectrum from one point to another. Not just from male to female or vice versa, but from their gender assigned at birth to any point on the gender spectrum. So it includes people who are non-binary or gender non-conforming. And the term non-binary functions as a sort of umbrella on its own, encompassing gender non-conforming identities such as agender, bigender, genderqueer, or gender fluid. So let's dive in. Agender people have little or no personal connection with gender. Bigender people identify as two distinct genders. Demigender people, like demi-boys and demi-girls, feel a partial connection to a particular gender identity, or just to gender at all. Gender fluid people have a gender identity or expression that is not fixed and is capable of changing over time. Genderqueer people have a gender identity or expression that falls between or outside male and female categories. Intergender people have a gender identity between genders or a combination of gender identities and expressions. And pangender people have a gender identity that is comprised of all or many gender identities and expressions. With all of this moving going on across the spectrum, trans people need a way to get from one point to another, and that's called a transition. Transitioning is the process through which some transgender people change their gender expression to more closely align with their gender identity. Gender expression is the external manifestations of gender, including names, pronouns, clothing, haircuts, behavior, voice, body characteristics, and more. So, to align their gender expression with their gender identity, trans people can transition through personal changes, like using a different name and pronouns or dressing differently, legal changes, like a new name or sex on legal documents, or medical changes, like hormone therapy or gender affirmation surgery, which is a medical procedure that more closely aligns an individual's body and physical appearance to his, her, or their gender identity. Trans people may use some, all, or none of these options in their transition, depending on their situation, but these changes are all intended to help ease gender dysphoria, which is the clinically significant distress caused when a person's assigned birth gender is not the same as the one with which they identify. With all of these different gender expressions representing different gender identities, assuming someone's gender based on their physical appearance can be useless at best and harmful at worst, especially because there are many different types of gender expression, even for people who are cisgender. A cross-dresser, for example, chooses to wear clothing associated with a different sex, usually without identifying as that sex or changing their gender identity, physically or otherwise. A femboy is someone who identifies as male and is happy being classified as a male, but prefers to wear traditionally feminine clothing, essentially the opposite of a tomboy. A drag queen is another specific type of crossdresser who uses cross-dressing as a performance art, usually a gay man dressing as a woman. Drag is the art of performing a gender or presenting as a different gender, usually creating a persona for the purpose of entertainment that is often an exaggeration of gender stereotypes. A performance artist who dresses as an exaggerated persona of a man is called a drag king. Many people who do drag may not wish to present as a different gender all the time, or extend their persona outside of performances. However, some drag queens like Eureka, Sonique, Peppermint, Gia Gun, and Jiggly Caliente use drag as a way to explore their gender identity and discover that they are in fact trans or non-binary. In fact, before all of these forms of gender identity and expression had their own labels and were so clearly categorized, the line between drag queen and trans woman was very blurry. So the art of drag itself comes from trans artists and activists fighting against society's gender norms, helping to pave the way to the many forms of gender identity and expression you see today. And finally, a quick note on pronouns. For many trans and non-binary people, names and pronouns are a very important part of their transition and gender expression. Just as someone might ask you to refer to them as Jim instead of James, someone might ask you to refer to them as he, him, his, she, her, hers, they, them, theirs, or something else entirely. Out of respect and common courtesy, you should always call people by the name and pronouns they prefer to be called. If you know someone who is transitioning, do not refer to that person by their old pronouns, and never refer to any trans person by their old name, or dead name. If you're not sure what pronouns or names someone uses, you can simply ask them, or introduce yourself first and say your pronouns. Introducing yourself with your pronouns, or including your pronouns on your name tag, bio, or email signature, can help normalize pronouns as part of introductions, and make trans and non-binary people feel more welcome. However you express your gender identity, you should always express respect toward the people around you. Try your best to use people's correct names and pronouns, and if you ever make a mistake, just apologize and try to do better next time. After all, we're all human. Thank you all for watching this video. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and let me know what kind of videos you'd like to see next. I'll see you then.